an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Ambassador's Mission, chapters 25, 26, and 27. The Messenger's News, A Long Night, and the Trap is Sprung. In these chapters, Lorkin has been willing to travel along to the traitor's stronghold with Tyvara in order to bear witness on her behalf for the charges of murder. And she never bothered to tell him that if he comes to their stronghold, he may not be allowed to leave. Tyvara, girl, what are you doing? Welcome to Spoil Me. Thank you so much, everybody, for bearing with me as I have been madly rescheduling things due to having no internet this weekend. I really thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode and for her patience, as she probably got notification after notification of me moving this around. Even my final scheduling of 1:30 turned out to be inaccurate. It was just a mess, and apologies. Anyway, welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. So, yeah, this episode is going to be focused mostly on what's going on with Lorkin, like, in theory, and what's happening over with Sania, because I feel like it's very clear at this point that Skellen is behind everything, and I'm wanting people to start to catch on to that. I'm annoyed with Cery for not figuring this out. I might be wrong still, but there's only one episode of coverage left, and I anticipate that it's going to turn out this dude is bad news. It's really nice that this book is almost exactly 500 pages even, so I'm going to be able to divide it up precisely by 50 pages. Anyway, so all right, let's start off with chapter 25, The Messenger's News. I love this opening because those of you who have gone backpacking and stuff are going to know exactly what the author is talking about here. Lorkin is hiking, and it says the pack he carried had seemed too small and light to contain enough supplies at first, but the weight of it appeared to have grown since he'd first shouldered it. If that isn't the truest shit. I backpacked through these mountains in Guatemala in order to get to this volcanic lake. And I packed what I thought was a reasonable weight of stuff. And it is absolutely bonkers how quickly that shit will feel like it has increased in weight by like threefold. And by the end of the day, you are sincerely looking through your stuff for things to leave behind because you're just like, I can't. There's no reason to have brought all of this. What was I thinking? I am an idiot. And he still has his like protective shield up, even though they told him not to use magic in obvious ways because that could attract attention from the wrong sort of folks over here. But he thinks that this doesn't really count as like obvious usage, which is... It's not like, what's the word I want? It's not aggressive magic. And I guess I could see that maybe it's something that people wouldn't detect unless they like tried to come at him. I really like, I wish that I had a better sense of how much people can feel magic in this world. Like, it seems as if in other things that I've read, people can feel magic in the air. There's like a sixth sense that you can get about whether it's being used, whether it's happening somewhere. But the thing about when that sort of thing occurs in other books is that it's usually like a magic that has been imbued into an object, a magical circle that has been created around a person that like, or around an object to protect it. And in this book, magic does not seem like it can be detached from the human beings that are performing it. You can store magic in a store stone, and you can, if you are a magician, use a bloodstone ring to communicate with one another. So there are magical objects, but without the magician, they don't seem to have a lot of power to them. I guess the store stone could be an exception because I'm not positive about it, but I assume, even though it was a magician who smashed the stone and broke it, that if it had been anybody who smashed the stone, that shit would have gone off like a bomb the same exact way. I don't know that for sure, but I assume that that is true. I am really curious, though, about what it is that made the author handle magic in this way. Because it's very, very limiting, but it's also very tidy in terms of there isn't a lot of, what's the word I want to use? I feel like in a lot of books, because of the way magic can be used, it is difficult to get around magic as a solution to a lot of problems that the author might want to remain problems for the plot. But if you can have people make objects that defy whatever it is that you've done here, that you were going to have be an obstacle, or if you can have, there be like certain objects that exist that can get in somebody's way, I could see that being a real stumbling block as an author, and wanting to mitigate that and be like, you know what, I'm going to keep all of this out and make it so that you can, heal people. And that's a big deal. You can protect yourself and protect others. And that's a big deal. But it's still, the magician has to be around and alive for this to continue working. There is no, I'm putting a magical protection over this building and leaving, and that protection shall remain, at least as far as I have seen. And the fact that there is a store stone that they can pour magical energy into, and that technology, for lack of a better word, is apparently lost. And there's only like one nation that seems to be able to do that, or used to be able to do that and doesn't anymore, makes me wonder if there isn't going to be in later books the reveal that is possible to imbue objects with magic, but that our people here in Kyralia and even in Sachaka didn't know about it. And that's part of what has been lost, because that's something that I think is pretty interesting in terms of the way this world is set up, is that magic is taken as a given that plenty of people have it. It's rare enough to be intimidating, and it's rare enough to be something that is sought after and gives you actual power. But it is not, it's not an unheard of skill, and it's not something that gets you persecuted. Despite that, there are different types of magical knowledge that each of these countries has that the others want and are very desperate to get. And I think that that's kind of a neat idea, is having the actual power itself be something that all peoples in all countries might have access to, and it's pretty much an equal footing on that, in that respect. But in terms of what individual folks decided to study and learn about magic and what they have discovered they could do with it, that's going to vary really wildly. So, we have in the last book her discovery of being able to use healing when that wasn't even something that people in Kyralia knew how to do either. She figures that out because she had wanted to be a healer so badly before she learned that she even had a magical skill. And it's sort of weird to me that she was able to, I think that's the only thing that I have trouble with, is that she figures out how to use magic to heal because she just desperately wants to be a healer. And that seems to be it. And I don't really buy that there's nobody in S'Chaka who so desperately would want to heal that they wouldn't have made their attempts. It doesn't seem like it's that difficult. And that might be part of what's the problem in my mind, is that if we were going to have her be the one to discover it, I would like for her to have like kind of stumbled on the knowledge via some means that nobody else would have access to. Because, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the name of the character from the previous book, the main character. I keep wanting to say Tavara, but that's her from this book. Is it Tiana? The only thing that she had that others might not is medical training from her father. But that is not enough. There are plenty of people who get medical training, and I can't imagine that there has never been anyone with medical training who didn't also find out that they had magic. So I think that's my one hang-up, is as much as I love that there are different uses for magic that other countries haven't learned about, the discovery of these different uses doesn't feel like it's enough, like there's enough of a barrier to it that I understand why certain countries haven't stumbled across it yet. In terms of the black magic and cutting and then like drawing power out of somebody's blood, that one I get not having stumbled across that, because you have to gain their consent to cut them and do this. And it's something that can kill a person pretty easily. Like if you don't watch it and take just enough, you can draw all of their magic out of them and kill them. And that could be a barrier both for the magician trying it, who's like worried that they're going to hurt a person, and that's going to really cut down on the number of people who are willing to subject themselves to this experiment if they know that they could be killed. So that one, I'm totally willing to set aside my disbelief for that. But medically, I mean, I don't really see a lot of backlash in terms of the experimentation there. I see that maybe it doesn't work, maybe somebody dies anyway, but there hasn't been any sort of, that I have seen, like horrible disfigurement that can come with it. Like, is there magical medical malpractice? Is there a way to fuse the wrong bones together when you're trying to heal them? Is there a way to like contaminate the blood when you're trying to get rid of an infection? Is there something that can go wrong? If there is, that would be a good enough explanation for me, but I haven't seen that at all. So I think that's really the main thing, is if we're going to have magic be a little bit more difficult with the way, and a little bit more restrained with the way that magic can be used, we need to make the discoveries for the uses of that magic pretty difficult. We need to give folks an explanation as to why, if you are given a gift like magic, you wouldn't push absolutely every limit you could to see what is possible with this. Because that is just the nature of human beings. And I could see finding out that there is like some really gnarly experimentation going on somewhere where somebody is trying to learn how to do healing, and they keep on like fucking up and like hurting people, and maybe not really caring that much. Like maybe they're picking people from, you know, marginalized communities that has nobody looking out for them. But you know, I don't know. I don't think up until this book that I fully realized how much magic in this book is much more a like interpersonal function rather than a force that can be like manipulated and left to do its own thing. Anyway, okay, so they'd left the cart and rode a few hours and were traveling on foot across hills and valleys that grew more rapidly more steep and stony. Tavara had grown more withdrawn the further they traveled. Her frowns made him feel vaguely guilty, but he wasn't sure why. And what we find out about the fact that he might not be allowed to leave, that, I believe, is what's causing her to start to get more and more agitated, because she's beginning to realize that she might be pulling him into a situation that he can't get out of. And Cery, who is her friend, Cery says something about how Tyvara is jealous a little bit later, which is what I had been suspecting from the last section. And Tyvara clearly, like, the assumption that Cery is working under is that Tyvara has grown to care about Lorkin romantically, even though she is pushing and pretending that's not true. So, you know, I think that Tyvara seems like a good enough person that she would feel guilty either way. But it seems pretty clear that because she actually cares about Lorkin, putting him in the position where he may never be able to return home again is particularly, like, upsetting. But also maybe she's got mixed feelings about it, because if she likes him, she doesn't want him to go. So then you have, well, I don't want him to leave because I like him. But if I didn't tell him and he gets put in this position where he can't leave, he could blame me, and I will have just shot my own chances at being able to pursue anything with him because he isn't going to trust me anymore. This is like a real stew, a fun mix of different emotions and assumptions and stuff. So they finally stop at this spot that has a bunch of huts and what looks like a low fence going around the outside, but which we find out a little bit later is treated as seating. And Tyvara stops and she looks at Lorkin as if she's trying to decide what to say. And Cery offers to speak for her, and Tyvara gets kind of irritated and says, "I can speak for myself. Stay here." And she walks away. And Lorkin's like, what is with her? Why is she being such a bitch all of a sudden? And Cery says she's just jealous and she doesn't know it. I've always wondered how it was that men in the rest of the world are in charge when they're so perpetually thick. I've said this before, that guys come from either one or group or the other. There are men who think that women who are just being nice to them are hitting on them. They really have been fed this, like, bullshit about how being kind is evidence that they are interested. Or there are men who have a woman being so obvious and throwing themselves at them, and they don't see it. And those guys tend to be ones who have, like, an inferiority complex, and it never occurs to them that a woman would be interested. So Lorkin, it's interesting that he seems to be coming from that second group, because he has a lot of experience with women and is apparently, like, kind of a bit of a playboy, according to people at home. But Tyvara is acting in a very different way than any of the women that he has encountered. So he's just reading this wrong because he doesn't know her particularly well. And he says, "I'm curious to know how traitor women stay in charge when they're just as inclined to communicate by indirect hints and innuendo as women everywhere else." Which is one of those things that I'm, like, surprised that a woman wrote this, where I'm like, I guess, but women can be very direct. And it's sort of like one of those stereotypes that women communicate indirectly that I find really frustrating, because women do that when there's a lot of men around because they need to feel safe. And being direct in the culture that we have is not really surprising. It's meant to be a coping mechanism and a protection. But I would think, because Tyvara's response, or not Tyvara, Cery's response is, "Oh, I like you." And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like Tyvara and Cery might, well, I was going to say, if you grow up with the traitors and you're in a primarily woman-centric society, I would imagine being indirect isn't as necessary, because you don't have the fear surrounding being direct that you would as a woman living in a man-dominated society. However, Cery and Tyvara seem to spend a good deal of time out in the rest of the world as spies. So maybe they have absorbed that sort of manner of handling people because they know that that is what is expected of them out in the greater world. Anyway, so there's this middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her hair named Savara. Now, forgive me, because there has been a long, delay, or not even delay. There has been a great deal of time passing and books between where we had been when, Sania was still in school. Is Savara the one that Cery was interacting with in the city? I feel like it is. I feel like I remember her name sounding like Sahara, so I think this is the same woman. I'm wondering if she is going to factor in again, because he has been sort of thinking about her, and he knows that things aren't, that the two of them are not really like great together, like the concept of them, but he is still like attracted to her in his memory. And I wonder if they will actually meet again in person. So Savara tells him that she's conveying an apology from herself and from the Queen, an apology for the disruption and the threats that he has endured. And he says that because she offers him, you can have you rejoin the guild ambassador. We can deliver you to him into his protection, and that won't be a problem. Or we can take you back to the border of Cerelia so that you can go home safely. Which one do you want? And Lorkin's like, well, I don't really want either one. I know that Tyvara is in some trouble, and I'd like to speak in her defense at her trial. And immediately there's like this sort of hubbub, because whether the Queen will even let him into Sanctuary is a question. And then they're like, well, maybe we can hold the trial outside of Sanctuary. They think maybe that would be too dangerous. And she says, how much does the guild know about us? And he says, nothing. Well, they've heard nothing from me anyway. I haven't communicated. And she says, what of the guild magician here? And then says, he has been following you since you left Arvis with surprising accuracy. And Lorkin's like, well, I mean, he didn't know anything when we got here, but he's smart, and I'm sure that he has started to hear some things and piece some things together. And Tyvara says he's had plenty of help from traitors, no doubt. So this is really interesting, because I was for some reason operating under the assumption that Tyvara was luring Dannyl for her own reasons and not telling Lorkin. But then it was this point where I realized, like, oh, somebody else is giving him the information he needs to track them. And it isn't Tyvara. And what is that about? Are they hoping that by doing this, they can... I like, it's clearly the other faction that wants Lorkin dead, but I don't understand what their interest is in getting Dannyl to follow them. What advantage does that give them? If they want Lorkin dead, are they also trying to get their hands on Dannyl as well? And maybe force the information about healing magic out of him? I don't really understand what it is they're hoping to get out of this. And also, we know Dannyl is with like several other Sachakans by the time they, catch up with them. The Sachakans are going to find where Sanctuary is too if the traders keep this up. Are they hoping to just fuck up Sanctuary? I don't feel like that seems what their objective was. But I guess I could be wrong about that. I don't know. So Savara says, this is when she says to Tyvara, you've explained the likely price for entering the city? Tyvara paused, then looked down. No, I was hoping we'd find a way around that. And I'm like, girl, what is you doing? So the speaker, who is Savara, is like, all right, let me see what I can do. And tells everybody to rest and eat. So Tyvara tells him when they're, sitting together privately, you should take up Savara's offer and go back to Cerelia. And she thinks that he should just get out of the country because she really believes that the other faction is going to try and kill him again. That's what she is worried about. And that is another like indicator that she has started to give a shit about him, which I rather enjoy, to be honest. And how are you going to prove that they've tried it before? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I'll let them read my mind. He heard Cery draw in a sharp breath. You can't. You promised that... She looked at Lorkin, then bit her lip. Tyvara sighed. We'll find a way around it. The price Savara spoke of. If you come to Sanctuary, there's a good chance you won't be allowed to leave again. Would you be willing to stay there for the rest of your life? I have to confess, when I heard that he was maybe getting taken to Sanctuary, it did occur to me briefly, well, that's supposed to be a secret location. How are they going to allow him in there if they're worried about keeping it secret? But I was immediately like, well, I bet they could just put a fucking bag over his head. Like, there's no reason that if they have him come with them that he has to know where they're going. And that assumption would work, that method would work if it were just about bringing him in some sort of vehicle to a location. But the closer we get to Sanctuary, the more I'm beginning to realize that there may not be any method of conveyance. It may be that he is going to have to hike the whole way, and good luck hiking in a blindfold. Like, this has been rough terrain that is tiring for him. I mean, he has magic to heal himself, so there's that, but nevertheless, it has been rough going. And I really wonder if there is a way for them to bring him there without him seeing. Like, it seems as if that hasn't even been suggested. So I have to assume there's a reason for that. So anyway, yeah, I'm just like, I keep assuming there has to be a way for them to handle this that they haven't thought of yet. But they're not stupid people, and this place has been around for hundreds of years. So, you know, there's somebody said about having the trial outside of Sanctuary, and that, for me, sounds like the smartest choice. That would be the way to do it. But they all seem to be a little bit concerned about security if they were to handle it that way. I don't know. So, let's see. Oh, right. Nobody from the other side will trust him. I forgot they actually say this. We cover his eyes and make sure he can't find it again. Tyvara sighed. We all know how well that worked last time. Last time it was a Sachakan and he was a spy. Lorkin is different. Do we have details on this? Have they mentioned this before? I can't remember if this has been talked about already. How is Sanctuary ever going to form alliances and trade with other nations if we never let visitors into and out of the city? And Tyvara just is like, I mean, we do need to get there eventually, but there is no way we are ready to be doing trade and making alliances right now. We don't even trust one another. And Cery's like, that it has to happen sometime. I don't really know what y'all are waiting for, but you brought him all this way. You had to know that this was a risk. And at this point, Tyvara gets irritated and walks away, and Cery kind of speaks on her. Cery's wingmanning Tyvara. She says that Tyvara's not always this grumpy. She's very smart and funny and quite lovable, and apparently quite good under the rug, as we say here. Though choosy. Not any and every man for our Tyvara. Don't worry about that. And I found this to be fun because it's pretty rare in books that seem to be geared more towards like YA. I'm not sure if this actually counts as YA. There are elements of it that feel that way. But usually you've got characters who are virgins and who have not got a lot of sexual experience. And even if both of them aren't, usually at least one of them is. And I kind of enjoy the fact that we have Lorkin, who's got a real rep for the ladies. And then we have Tyvara, who we get reassurance has plenty of experience with men. And that this isn't like, you know, her first rodeo. And he realizes that Cery has been assuming that there's something going on between the two of them. And Lorkin is sort of like, I mean, I have been interested, but she's sure not fucking interested in me. So it's sort of pathetic. And there's not really anything going on that Cery should have noticed. Does she think that it's not one-sided, though? Because I don't feel that. It's not, you know. So, let's see. Oh, okay, right. I forgot. Because I thought that the conversation about Tyvara pushing him away was here, but it comes up again later. But yeah, I'll just mention it now anyway. Because Tyvara says something to him at one point. I hope that you don't think that there's more going on between the two of us than there is, Kiralian. She doesn't even call him by his name. And Cery, totally within Tyvara's hearing, which I actually thought was really funny, just tells him, don't worry, she's always like this when she likes somebody. She pushes them away until she doesn't. And Tyvara just snaps at her to shut the fuck up. So honestly, Cery has been just a lovely addition to our lineup here. I really appreciate her being around to lend some light to the situation. So as they are about to kind of settle, they think, for the night, Savara comes out and tells them all that Dannyl is on his way and is much more close behind than they expected, and that they have to divide in 3 groups and head in separate directions so as to throw off the trackers. And Lorkin has to switch shoes with somebody else so that the prints that they have been following lead them in the wrong direction. So they head out, and it says, Lorkin followed, his mind shifting between wondering if his suspicions about Tyvara were true, itching to know what Savara's decision would be, and worrying that Dannyl and the Sachakans would catch up with them. And if they did, what would the Sachakans do? What would the traitors do? Would it end in a fight? He didn't want anyone else dying because of him. Would it came to a fight? If it came to a fight, what should he do? Would he have to choose between joining Dannyl in order to prevent a battle and siding with the traitors so he could help save Tyvara from execution? These are all very interesting questions, because if Dannyl were by himself, I would feel much more confident about how this would go. But the fact that he has other Sachakans involved now really muddies things a lot. So then we have Cery, and he gets the news. He's, hanging out with his daughter, who is practicing her fighting techniques, and they get interrupted by somebody coming to bring them some news, a messenger from Skellen. And this messenger notices Cery's daughter and gives her a bit of like a once-over, and Cery's dander is immediately up because he's very protective of her. And it's always funny to see that sort of thing happen and not really be able to like say or do anything as a parent. Like, your kid has to learn to fend for themselves. And if somebody isn't even doing or saying anything inappropriate, they just give them a look, you are going to look like a lunatic if you decide to like call them out for that. But if you're an adult, you also like know the signs and know exactly what the fuck is happening here when somebody is giving another person that kind of evaluation. So you might not be able to like justifiably lose your shit, but you can give them a bit of a look and be like, do you fucking mind? The thing is, Cery's not supposed to let anyone know that she's his daughter. So if he acts protective of her, it's likely not going to be assumed that she's his daughter, but that maybe she's like involved with him, which is super weird. So anyway, this dude comes in and tells him Skellen said he found the quarry and is setting a trap. If you bring your friends to the old butchery in Inner West Side when the sun sets tonight, they can take possession of their new pet. It just occurred to me just a second, potentially why Skellen is interested in meeting Sonia. So this message comes. They can take possession of their new pet. And I have just been assuming from the get-go that Skellen is the guy involved with whomever the rogue is, right? I have been assuming Skellen's the baddie mostly because he deals in Rowett. And for me, I feel like you can't have control over the supply of a drug that wreaks this much havoc on people and still be any sort of decent person. It's not even like a question to me. There is talk about like honor among thieves and, you know, the every man has to have a code. And to a point, I think that you can engage in illegal activity and criminal activity and still have your own set of morals. But when you get into something like this kind of drug, I feel that goes out the window, and that's not something that you can claim any sort of ownership of. And therefore, when this message comes, and for some reason the way it was worded, my alarm bells started going off, and I really didn't expect there to be a rogue magician at all. I honestly thought they were going to be walking into a straight up trap. When it turns out that it's not who they thought, and Skellen gets irritated with Cery because he says something about how Cery never told him. Cery says when he sees this girl, she isn't the same one. She's taller. Her face is the wrong shape. And she like seems too young. Skellen's response is, you didn't say any of this before, but now I suppose it's useful. And I'm like, that sounds to me like somebody who went shopping for a girl that fit the description that Cery gave him and is irritated at the fact that Cery knew more about what the woman looked like that he had not yet shared. And that Skellen, while annoyed about it, is now kind of like, all right, well, I messed up once, but I think I've got a better idea now so that when I go looking again for somebody who fits this description, I can find them pretty easily. The thing is, how the hell, if Skellen did do what I think, which is go shopping for somebody who fits the basic description and is what he believes would pass as the rogue, how can she actually have magic? Like, this is not something that happens very often. And the likelihood of finding another rogue is really, really low, especially that like fits the description. So, is it possible that this girl that I believe is a pawn that Skellen has procured, is it possible that she doesn't have magic and that actually somebody else was casting some sort of protective spell on her behalf? Like, my question is, could her having magic have been faked somehow and she isn't even a rogue at all? And if so, how, like, Skellen can't hope to do this again, because once they get her back to once they get her back to the guild and test her, they'll sense that she doesn't have any magic. So, I don't know. I'm still so suspicious of Skellen, but I don't really have a good theory as to how all of this could have been pulled off. I know why he'd be doing it. I understand, like, what his motivations would be here, which is He's running the Rowett. He needs this rogue to work for him in order to pull all of this off somehow. Maybe he even wants to meet Sania because Sania has been healing people who have this addiction, and he does not appreciate that. So he's going to try and like figure out how she's been doing the healing and figure out a way to like, is it possible that the Rowett is magically tampered with to cause addiction that a healer can't fix? And we know that Sania goes in through the back a lot of the time because she... The thing is, I was going to say maybe Skellen doesn't know exactly which one Sania is and what she looks like, and he wants to get a close-up look at her so he knows who to target. But Sania started going in through the back because everybody recognized her. She started going in through the back because she got swarmed by people who knew who she was. And I don't know, although it could be that she just like has the black robes and they recognize the robes and they don't recognize her face. I really don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm all over the place here with my theories. I'm just like, I thought that I had an idea. And then once I like poked and prodded at it, I was like, oh, I don't know if that actually works. So Cery also has to like decide whether or not to involve his daughter in this whole thing, because his impulse, of course, is to keep her safe, keep her away from all of this, and not wanting to put her in any position where somebody can figure out who she is, but also, he doesn't seem to totally think she's ready for a fight, and yet at the same time, and I really appreciate this, Cery knows very, very well what kind of impulse Anya has in terms of wanting to avenge family that she lost, and just mete out some sort of justice or witness it at the very least. And so Cery toys with the idea of just telling her to stay here while they go deal with this. And pretty much right away is like, oh no, I can't do that. Like, if she's anything like me, this is going to be way too big a deal. And she's like normally a pretty obedient girl, but this is going to be a time where it would warrant an exception. And I can definitely see her just being like, fuck that, and following after me anyway, because that is precisely what I would have done at her age in this position. And I really love whenever an adult is able to remember what it was like to be a kid. There is so much that we forget about our own foolishness, I guess, is the simplest way to say it. Our own ignorance, lack of understanding, lack of foresight. And when you are a grown-up, you give kids instructions knowing that you have their best interest at heart, and thinking that these kids are going to have the capacity to understand and appreciate that about what you are telling them to do. And they don't. Kids think that you do not take them seriously and underestimate them, and that you are telling them to stay away because you don't know any better and you don't think they can handle themselves, when in fact they know they can. Hint, they think they can. But in their mind, they know they can. They know you're wrong, and they're going to prove to you that you're wrong by doing the thing that you think they can't do. And it's really frustrating because when you, like, there are times where indeed adults underestimate kids and think they can't handle a thing that they can. But much of the time, adults are correct and are drawing from years, decades of experience with this thing. And they know that this kid is not up to it. And the kid just does not take those decades of experience seriously as a source of information and estimation of what it is they can handle. So anyway, what I'm saying is, as a grown-up, it is really, really easy to get angry at adolescents and teenagers who disobey. But when you are an adult, it's really hard to put yourself back in the shoes of a kid that age and remember how little you knew in a way that gives you empathy for those kids than otherwise, which is usually when you think back and remember how little you knew, you have a little bit of contempt for these kids. Like, you idiots think you know and you don't know shit, which is true. But you have to try and put yourself in their place rather than simply looking at them objectively and realizing how silly they are, and work with them from the place of empathy rather than otherwise, or else you're never going to fucking get anywhere. You're just going to constantly be fighting them and they will be resentful of you. And if you can't do that, good luck. So Cery does that and decides to bring her with him. And it doesn't seem to like matter in the end because this whole thing goes wrong. Sania, she gets called to see Administrator Osen, who is using a bloodstone ring to communicate with Dannyl, and is watching because Dannyl has put the ring on under the assumption that he is on like really close to and about to recapture Lorkin. And it turns out he is on the wrong trail. He has been led astray. And it's close to evening at this point over there. So they're going to be running out of light, and they've been using that tracker. And once he doesn't have the light to be able to see well, shit just isn't going to work out. So she is waiting for Lord Osen to tell her what the hell is going on. And she's like on the edge of her seat when it turns out that they tracked the wrong person and they're going to have to turn around and go the other way. It's very clear, according to Rothan, who is also here with her, it's going to be hours before they have figured out whether or not this new trail they are following is the correct one. And in the meantime, she is given a message about your friend in the city says his friend has found the thing you're after. You have to be at the old butcher's building in Inner West Side by sunset. Bring your other friend. Rothan grabs the note and reads it, and then immediately is like, all right, well, I guess there's nothing more that we can do here. Osen, keep us informed. We're going to go, because he knows that this is exactly what the fuck she needs. She needs a distraction for a little while because she's going to lose it if she's just sitting around waiting to find out what's going on. And so she agrees to go, and it's not really until he sort of like pushes the issue with her that she realizes how time sensitive this is, and that this is actually a pretty big deal too, as much as she's super concerned about her son, and she needs to go and refocus. So she heads out, and I really appreciate that, like, once Regin meets up with her, because that's who Cery meant in his note with bring the other friend. Once Regin meets up with her, he has like brought a disguise and a cart that looks like an ordinary one rather than one of the guild carriages. And Sania realizes that she's been so distracted about her son that she didn't even think about the fact that she can't show up in the middle of the fucking city at sunset in her own robes in a guild carriage. She's not supposed to go out into the city. This is like hugely against the rules. So she is being put in this position here where she has to be smart about this other job, but all of her brain power is going towards worrying about her kid. So when Regin turns up and he has like what is needed to disguise them, she is feeling really, really grateful about it. And then when they have the conversation with oh my God, what is his name? I've already forgotten the name of the other baddie that I have been suspicious of this whole time. When she has the conversation with him, he wants to know about like the battle with Sachaka, which she doesn't want to talk about, understandably, because, you know, the love of her life died during it. Regin is the one who steps in and decides to tell the story on her behalf. And she feels extremely grateful about that too. And she's just feeling really weird because there has been more than one occasion at this point of feeling a little bit indebted to him for the kindness that he is showing when that has never been a thing. And it's almost enough to like make me a little bit suspicious, but I don't feel like this author is the type that's going to be like, I'm going to show some character growth with Regin, and then I'm going to like backtrack on that and make it that he was really the bad guy the whole time and you shouldn't have trusted him, you fool. I don't feel like that's the message that this author is going to go with. So I am going to trust that Regin is genuinely attempting to be a better person. The thing is, I'm not entirely sure. In reality, if somebody who was capable of the things that Regin was when he was a kid would be able to have that kind of empathy and step in and help like the way he is now. So yeah, they find out that this girl isn't the one. Sania has to take her in to the guild anyway, because she is supposed to be a member if she has ability. But the thing is now that this girl is going to lead to the revelation that Sania was like traipsing around outside of the guild approved territory. And that is going to cause the leash to tighten around her and make it potentially harder for her to help with the actual rogue later on. And now that I think about it, that might be part of the point. There may be some intention here at getting Sania to trip up and reveal what she's up to so that these guys can keep on Skellen, that's his fucking name, so that these guys can keep on doing what they've been doing without having to worry about her being backup for Cery. However, they don't necessarily factor in Regin into that equation. Sania might be the one that they're the most frightened of because of her connection with black magic. But I don't know. Anyway, that could be part of the motivation, is wanting just to get Sania in trouble, which could be down to like one of the other magicians for all I know. If there is a magician that is working with Rowett sellers, I'm over here assuming that this magician is like, an actual rogue from another country. But maybe it's somebody who is pretending to have an accent and donning some sort of disguise. It might be somebody with that's like closer to Sania than we know. That would be a shame. All right, so let's go back a little bit, and I'll just cover this real quick. I only have a little bit of time left here. Let's talk about Dannyl with this tracker, Un. It turns out that Un he has his own gripe with the traders. And the way this gets revealed is Dannyl and Un go off tracking on their own after a little bit. This is a kind of I rather liked this. So all of the slaves are dropping their stuff, and they are exhausted after following the wrong trail and attempting to follow another trail. Sun is finally going down. Everybody's beginning to rest. And Dannyl is realizing that all of the other magicians are exhausted too, because he has forgotten that they don't know how to heal themselves. So he doesn't have any blisters and he doesn't have the exhaustion. And there's this moment where he says, I hadn't realized how much of an advantage it is. It could be a significant one if our countries were ever to fight each other or another enemy. If we both have to trek to meet our foe, the Sachakans will be the only ones sore and tired from the effort. Now, my question here is, if you are able to use black magic, does that not have any sort of automatically restorative effect? Because I kind of would assume that it does. Like, you have exhausted yourself walking all day, and you cut somebody's arm and draw their very life force from them. And not necessarily enough to kill, but it's still like a significant amount of energy. I don't I would just have assumed that that would have a restorative effect to your entire body. So he's having this assumption that this is like going to be a huge advantage. But did that come up during the original Sachakan war? Or I guess it wasn't Sachakan, the war against the Achani? Because they trekked all the way across to Kyrillia, and it did not seem to be too much of a disadvantage to them. I don't remember them talking about being like exhausted and tired or anything like that. But I think this is put here so that when it is proposed to Dannyl that they share their healing secrets with the traders, he will have been contemplating what an advantage it is to know these secrets when the Sachakans don't. And he will be more reticent to share the information than I would have anticipated. The Duna tribesmen immediately, as everybody is beginning to settle for the evening, he's obviously a little bit irritated at the fact that he hasn't been able to locate the right trail. And he says that he is going to go and keep looking, and maybe that way they can follow it in the morning. Dannyl, because he's not tired, is like, can I go with you? And follows along, and they get to this cave. And Dannyl goes in without really like exploring it magically first with light. And it's not until he gets inside that he realizes it's lined with the same stones as the cave that had almost killed him where Tyen saved him. And he screams a little bit, like he really loses it. And Un sees that reaction and is like, you know what this is, huh? You've seen this before. And tells him that the stones here don't have power, that they're naturally occurring and haven't been like placed here, like the ones in the place that Dannyl knows. And Un says, people once lived in the mountains here. They knew the secret of the stones, but they are gone. All things end. And then he corrects himself and says, not all. A few secrets Duna kept. And Dannyl says, you know how to make gemstones with magic in them? And he says, not me, some of my people, trusted ones, and traitors. Long ago they came and made a pact, but they broke it and stole the secrets. That is why I help the Sachakans, even after what they do to my people, the Duna not forgiven the traitors. So that's interesting. The traitors are over here with their high horse talking about how the Acheron was supposed to have given them this knowledge and didn't. But it turns out that they did the same, they did not the same thing, but they stole secrets, even though they were supposed to be working with them. And I just find that interesting. That's all I'm saying. So when they managed to get up out of the cave, Dannyl keeps thinking about how the last time he went in one like that, it nearly killed him, and remembers how Tyen saved him and the way that he realized it at that moment, and feels really sad about it. And there's this quote that's been highlighted a couple times. A pity we had to change so much. Instead of growing around each other like that romantic notion of couples being like entwined trees, we became uncomfortably tangled, competing for water and soil. Which is an interesting way to say that, but I think I can get down with that. And this makes me think that there is going to be a thing with this other, with Achadi, but we'll see how that goes. And he's just, really caught up in thinking about the Store Stone and the potential of actually maybe figuring out how that works. And it says, suddenly he understood something that was going to cause him considerable awkwardness with the men he was with, the Sachakan king, the guild, and not the least, Lorkin's mother. Suddenly he understood there was a good chance Lorkin did not want to be found. I don't really understand what it is that he thinks here. I don't understand the solution that he's coming to, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, or if this is meant to be a little bit of a cliffhanger for me as a reader. Because I feel like the implication is maybe he's doesn't want to like go back home again. But I don't know why he would think that. He doesn't have, I don't know. Yeah. So I feel like I've covered pretty much everything there. With the trap is sprung, that's pretty much, I said everything. And, oh yeah. And then there's that whole thing about how Skellen is the one that the girl keeps looking at for like signals on what to say. And Sania is like, not, she notices it, but she doesn't make the connection that I feel like she should. So, I almost forgot. So at the end of the trap is sprung, Lorkin is thinking about trying to contact his mom. He's been like, sitting on that blood ring, not really sure if they are going to find it on him. And if they did, he figures that they're not going to let him leave. They won't let him keep it. And they also won't let him leave because he'll have time to communicate his location using that blood ring. So he uses it to contact her and explains a little bit. Someone tried to kill me. I was saved by a woman. She's, yada, yada, yada. I think I can change their minds. The guild doesn't know anything about them. I want to learn as much as I can. And she's like kind of resigned to the fact that she can't stop him from doing what he wants to do. But she tells him, I expect you to stay in contact. And he's like, that's going to be hard because they will notice and they might take it from me. I think they'll recognize what this is. So he stands up and Un is coming upon him, having tracked and figured out we're in the general right place. Let's see. Dannyl looked up. The top of the wall wasn't too far away. They levitate to the top. I love that earlier when Dannyl uses levitation to get out of the cave, Un finds that really hilarious, even though he's not resentful of it. He just thinks it's funny. So I'm trying to find the spot. We better stick close to the ambassador, the first Ashaki then. Though not so close that we have to endure the stink of our tracker. The others chuckled. Dannyl looked beyond them to see Un was standing 100 strides or so away, beckoning to him. It was obvious the tribesman preferred his assistance to the Sachakans. He caught up with Un and they continued on. Keep the magic shield on. Keep it strong, because he fucking knows. And a crack and boom shook the air. Dannyl and Un spun about, then threw up their hands as stones pattered against the barrier that protected them. And there's this fucking kind of landslide. And Dannyl can't even tell whether the Sachakans are underneath it or not. They're so far away. And Lorkin says they'll be fine. They had strong barriers. And he tries to use this as a means of communicating really quickly with Dannyl before everybody else catches up, and explains the situation. The thing that I think is not great writing here, and I think that's part of why I forgot about this meetup, is Lorkin just got through explaining the situation to his mother, and now he sits down and explains the situation to Dannyl, and we don't need to see that. As readers, we know the situation, and I think we can trust that Lorkin tells what he needs. Most of the time, I appreciate getting to hear exactly what a character says to another, because I want to know precisely how much information the other person's working for and what impression they could have gotten if they misunderstood. But here, it's just basic stuff that there's nothing to it that I needed, and I have to sit through it twice, which it just doesn't seem that necessary. So anyway, he tells Dannyl to pretend that they lost the trail. This isn't just because of your father and this woman, is it? The young magician blinked. No, I want to know more about the traders. They don't have slaves, and the way their society is structured is completely different. So I guess that's what Dannyl says. Like, he doesn't want to be found because he wants to, like, see what the deal is with the traders. I guess. It just doesn't feel that... It feels like it's treated like a thunderbolt of understanding, and it's not that exciting. So, yeah, I'm just like a little bit... I don't know. There's only one section left of coverage, and I feel like so little has really happened in this book. And I don't know what to expect for the finale chapters. This has been very slow moving, and I really thought that by now there would be more going on than there is. And I don't know if that's just me or what. I'd be interested in hearing other people's impressions, but it just feels like not a lot is... I don't feel like we've advanced very much character-wise, and even plot-wise, really. So, at least she was away from Skellen. We go over to Sania. It had been very enlightening. She's thinking about what's going on with Lorkin. And this woman comes up to Sania and says, "Did you know that you're letting the other rogue go? I know where the real one is. I was watching you and Cery from the roof of one of the other buildings and saw her turn up to do the same. I think she's still there." And she tells Regin to go, and he says that Regin needs to be the one, or Regin tells her she needs to be the one to catch her. That they need to understand that you're more than a healer, and restricting you is a waste. So she is following and looks up, and there's a woman levitating down this alley. And Anya is asking her, "Do you think that you're going to be able to take her down?" And Sania's like, "Well, only one way to find out," and tells her that when Regin comes back, bring him here because I might need his help. When she turned back, the woman was about to emerge from the side alley. Sania stepped forward and threw up a barrier to block the woman's way. How do I not remember this interaction? Oh, as Skellen's face flashed through Sania's memory, she felt a chill run down her spine. Same reddish dark skin, same strange eyes. This woman is one of the same race. She thinks I won't dare use magic with all these people around, and she's right. Oh, right. Okay, yeah. I completely missed this part. So, yeah, this woman is refusing to tell Sania her name. And I'm so over time. I'm sorry, guys. And she tells her that, she doesn't need the fucking guild, that she's not from Kyralia and she knew magic long before she ever showed up here. And Sania wants to know where her homeland is. And she says, whether you like it or not, you're here now and you are bound by the same laws. And she tries to hit back at Sania, but she's got a pretty solid barrier up. And she thinks about maybe waiting till this woman gets exhausted. She began pushing the rogue firmly but gently forward. The healer and alchemist fell into step beside her. And in this way, through streets lined with curious onlookers, they escorted the second rogue found that day to the guild. So we'll see what they make of Sania having been out there, collecting rogues. But hopefully, I don't know. Is this woman related to Skellen? Because it's treated like, oh, they're of the same race. They must be teamed up. And I'm not sure I love that. Anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this. Again, I'm so sorry about all of the delays and everything. I hope that you were able to enjoy it. And I will be seeing you guys soon again with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.